This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and what a finale to the Guinness Six Nations. Just a remarkable sequence of matches on Saturday. And Ewen McKenzie, what for you was the highlight of those matches?
They're all pretty good for me. I enjoyed all the games. I didn't tip them all correctly, but it was obviously went down to the last second of the French-England game to determine the winner. But I think they were all good quality games for different reasons. I really enjoyed the Scotland-Ireland clash. That was tactically that was a really interesting game. And Wales, they showed some of the promise that we talked about. I was disappointed for Italy; they didn't get going till the second half. And then the France-England game was just thrust and parry. Backwards and forwards, and ultimately, there's a lot of discussion I know since the game about refereeing decisions and things like that. That's what happens. If you look at the statistics for all the games, and they're all very close, so that in the end it gets down to small things, and the referee might have been part of that, but also just down to errors and little things. I saw someone whinging online after Chesham made that intercept that he didn't. He was showboating and didn't go around and make it an easy conversion. So little things like that do matter. Back in our day, there was no showboating. You just wanted to get to the line, and clearly these days it's a bit different with Pollock and some of the others. So there's all those little bits have become discussion topics, but ultimately they were good quality games, and it was a really good championship in the end. All the teams were competitive.
Okay, well, let's just go through the matches in a little bit more detail. Eddie Jones, Ireland 43, Scotland 21, as Ewen McKenzie says, an entertaining match of rugby played in beautiful conditions there in Dublin. Ireland, impressive again to see that Andy Farrell is really continuing to build the depth into the Irish team 18 months out from the 2027 Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, I think they've created some good depth in their squad, Ireland. They're adapting their game a little bit. I think they're probably a little bit less structured than they were under the Smith era and Farrell taken over, and that's probably been amplified during this Six Nations. The influence of 9 we've spoken about before, Gibson-Park, is immense. And they were just too good, too intense. Good structured rugby against the flair of Scotland, which Finn Russell has an enormous role in that team. Plus, outstanding back three. I thought Scotland's back three in the tournament were probably close to the best three. Kinghorn came home very strongly in the tournament, and that Darcy Graham's a little guy but great feet, and that Steyn, I think he's 33. He's made a late blossoming, big, strong guy, courageous in the air, runs great lines and runs hard. So a really good game of rugby.
So just in terms of that Scotland team, what's your assessment of the Scottish team, particularly again as we look 18 months out from the 2027 Rugby World Cup? There's certainly 3 victories in the Six Nations, some impressive performances, particularly against France and England also. They were very good. Are you seeing the same types of development and improvement in Scotland that you're seeing in Ireland?
Well, I think the first thing to acknowledge is that Scotland's a small rugby country. They only have 2 professional teams, so they've got a small pool of players. They've been able to recruit Scottish heritage players from overseas, and Dempsey's a good example of that, and the centre's a good example of that add to the depth. So they've got a fairly set pool of players, and they've got to maximise that pool of players, and I think they do that pretty well. I think Gregor's got a strong identity to the team. They know how they want to play, which is a lot based around Finn Russell. But, the role of guys like Ben White and as we said, the back three in aiding Finn Russell's skill set has been considerable with a hard pack of forwards. They're a team that can win as we've seen, nearly any game they're in, but they can also get beaten badly, because they need things to go their way. And I think they'll continue to be that sort of team. And, that's a pretty good position for Scotland to be in.
Can you see them continuing to improve significantly so as that they can challenge the best teams?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think, they've got their role as a disruptor in World Rugby. Small playing nation, can play well on their day. They can beat anyone. But whether they can be a top 5 team in the world, you're competing. You look at the resources they've got compared to England. You're talking about New York Yankees versus who's the poorest team?
Savannah Bananas or something.
Yeah, exactly, mate. So, you can't compare apples to apples, but that's not to say they can't have their day. And I think they've shown that in these Six Nations. And that's what they'll continue to do. And I think they'll do that really well up to the World Cup. I think, there will be a time where a number of these players come off, like Finn Russell, and then we'll see a drop in their performance.
Yeah. All right. What about for you, Ewen McKenzie? What's your assessment of both Ireland and Scotland?
Well, I thought the first try by Scotland was emblematic of their capacity. There was the lateral play that they, when you got Finn Russell there, they tend to be a bit more lateral, but they had a mix there of power, which is, they're not a power team, but they can play that way in short bursts. And I thought the first try, which was, 19 phases, I think, had a really good blend of what Scottish rugby's about. And so for me, the game was about Ireland are better direct, and they're very good, and they've developed that short passing game at the line, forwards and backs, as opposed to Scotland, who are generally playing laterally, trying to make opportunity a little bit more laterally, a little bit more width. And so the battle was around, the defensive line speed to see they can knock Scotland off behind the advantage line, then about the quality of the work at the ruck. And that's where, like for me, Tadhg Beirne, I wondered about Tadhg Beirne. I didn't know, I hadn't watched him a lot, wondered about him in the Lions series, but I've got to say, I've been super impressed with his ability as a footballer. He's very, for me, an Owen Finnegan type player. He's got these wonderful instincts about the game. And whether he's playing second row, back row, whatever, he's got very instinctive. He knows the laws of the game. He's a very effective player. And he's a talisman in there in the middle of their pack. He's the guy that gets in and disrupts all the time. And if he's on fire, then that makes it very difficult for the opposition. So add to that Gibson-Park. Anyone, if you want to watch, if you take the time, I did it. I just watched Gibson-Park. I watched what he does on multiple phase, and he's always scanning the short side. Like he's got the time to scan short side and then pick up. He's got 2 or 3 options open side, but he's always looking at the short side to see if he wants to come back. And a lot of halfbacks are just worried about getting to the ruck and then feeding the ball to someone who's called for it, the 10 or whatever. They're not actually looking at the tactical opportunities in the game. And that's what Dupont does as well. He's able to, they've got the time to read the game, and Gibson-Park was terrific at doing that. And I was watching him, and so watch his head. You'll see him, you scan, looking for opportunities, keeping options open. So he's actually running the game in that sense. I think Crowley's been the difference for me in the recent games. He's been a much better option for him at 10. It suits their game. But they played a more direct game with the short passing options, Gibson-Park doing his work. And in the end, that was enough to be better than Scotland. Scotland, generally, I wrote a note. I said, Scotland have really got to try and pass their way. Finn Russell, they're going to try and pass their way out of trouble, or out of pressure. And that's where Ireland were able to suffocate them a little bit, and therein lied the game.
All right. Well, enjoyable game to watch, as you said. Just wrapping up the Six Nations for both teams, out of 10, what would you give Ireland and what would you give Scotland for their 2026 Guinness Six Nations? What's the Ewen McKenzie mark for Ireland and Scotland?
Well, I mean, Ireland were great except for the first game, and they got mugged in the first game, albeit for 50 minutes, and then they came back into it in the second half. But after that, you've got to give them an 8 or something like that because they were right in it, and in control and looking good. And looking at improving again. I was saying last year that maybe they'd reached their peak, but I don't know about that. I think that they've introduced a few new players and had to cover a few things. I think there's a few creaks and groans, scrum time, a few things like that they've got to iron out. But if they can keep their key players, the spine of their team functioning, they've still got some pretty life there. So I'd give them an 8. And Scotland, probably similar, 7 or 8, something like that. They had a few close games, but got there, which is character. The Wales win in particular, but then they dropped against the Italians. So a bit up and down, probably a 7. But they were there. They were in the running for the tournament, in the last game. So you've got to give them something there. So I'd give them a 7, But like Eddie said, I don't know how much more upside there is. I think it's going to be the team that no one wants to play against, because they're problematic, particularly at home.
All right, Eddie Jones, you've got your back to your schoolmaster days.
Got the red pen out, mate. 8 out of 10 both. Good.
8 out of 10 both.
Teams. Good.
Geez, you're in a good mood.
It's been a good weekend of rugby, mate.
Oh, yeah.
8 out of 10 both. I thought both of them had really good tournaments, played good rugby, gave great entertainment, both in their different ways. The really interesting point about Gibson-Park and Dupont, as compared to other halfbacks in the tournament, Free used to speak about where the halfback puts the ball up. You think about a halfback that traditionally they've always passed off their back foot. So if you go to the breakdown and you put your back foot on the ball, you almost tell the defence, don't worry about me now.
Yeah.
Because you're in a passing and now it's hard to run. Whereas Dupont and Gibson-Park tend to pick up the ball in the middle of their feet, and therefore when they come out, they're loaded and they hold the defensive line as they run. And it creates a lot of opportunities for the way teams defend now, because it disrupts that relationship between the 1, 2 and 3 defenders. And, I thought Gibson-Park was as close to the best player in the tournament.
Mm.
And that goes on the back of his British lines. I thought he was the best player there. I'm in love with the bloke. He's fantastic. And particularly when you consider about his background, he was be fair to say he was an average Super Rugby player. And he's gone to Ireland. He's worked so hard to become such a good international player. And it's a great example for any player out there. If you want to make it, you can make it. And sometimes you've got to leave your country to make it.
No doubt. You have been praiseworthy of him for a long time, and well done to both teams.
He sat on the bench for one game too.
Yeah,
that's right.
He's still player of the tournament. Yeah. Right. So, but that was smart coaching. I think it freshened him up, and it certainly gave him some verve in the last 3 games, big time.
One of the other guys that Andy Farrell called out as player of the tournament from his team is the Irish fridge, Stu McCloskey, a guy who's, again, another player who's been, I think, waiting for 10 years or something like that to get his opportunity. But he, again, was another player who's come into his own, really, in this Six Nations. Eddie Jones, you must have been impressed with the way McCloskey played.
Yeah, he's a big lump, mate. He carries hard, carries straight, and he's just the right foil for someone like Crowley's, great strength is he underplays his game. And at the moment with Gibson-Park being dominant and a hard-running 12, Crowley fits in nicely. But Crowley, good hard-working player, good physical player, hard to tackle.
Yeah, you think he's a big lump of a bloke, but he actually threw some really nice passes, threw a great long pass for one of the tries. So
he did.
A bit of skill there. He showed good pace last week, chasing down in defence. He's a big lump, but he's got more. There's a lot more to him than just that, So, he's a bit of a surprise packet, and
fantastic.
Good choice.
Well, very good, and a very enjoyable game. And so, big thanks to both teams and the coaching staffs and everybody else from Scotland and Ireland who've put in such a wonderful performance through the 2026 Guinness Six Nations. And then we headed down to Cardiff and into the darkness of the Principality, or the whatever it's called, stadium down there. Wales, just too good, too determined. Ewen McKenzie, your thoughts going into it? That just looked to me that this was a game that Wales were just simply not going to lose.
Well, I don't know about that, but we talked about all the preconditions that are in play and the emotional aspects and the fans and whatever. So they needed to deliver, and they did, and they got 21-0 at half time. I couldn't believe that scoreline. Three tries off lineouts in different ways. So whether that was tactical, but they were able to create opportunities. One was driven, the rest was sort of plays off around the lineouts that end up in tries. So it was well worked, well coached. They've been showing a lot. I thought about Wales. I didn't know much about them before the season. Now I'm looking at them, and you talk. Not everyone, but people talk about the spine of the team. So the captain, Jerry Lake, at 2, Wainwright, 2 tries, first 2 tries of the game. I like the look at him. Williams at 9, but Edwards at 10. He looks pretty good. He did that drop goal. So he's got a bit of variety in his game. He looks tough too. And then you've got, Rees-Zammit at fullback. So you're starting to look at sort of guys possibly could be sort of world-classy type players, they're not there yet, but they've got quality in those key positions. And so their progress has been admirable. You need the ticker and you need the venom in defence and things like that, and they've showed that during the tournament. So all that together, the win's not a surprise. I was hoping Italy get there because I've been backing them, but I also said that I'd be happy to see Wales win because I actually think they deserve, and they did. They got out there and made it happen. Italy didn't light a candle until the second half, so and then they showed their quality for 20 minutes, but it was all too late.
But that Welsh pack, that sort of, we talk about regularly about intent and wanting to rip in, but players like Botham, like Mann, like Jenkins, like Carre, they've got players who are just enjoying, they're loving ripping into the game, aren't they?
That's right. And there's a lot to be said for the fact that he named an unchanged team. It's a lot there. That's the coach saying, I've got confidence in you as players, and they're able to get out there and back up the work they did the week before and the week before that, and pick up where they left off. There's no changes, no new combos. They're able just to get it, roll the sleeves up and get stuck in. And I think there's a lot in that. I think there's, for me personally, I like to have a settled team. And I didn't mind picking the same team 2 weeks in a row, 3 weeks. I didn't care if they were performing. It was up to other people to force their way into the team. I think a lot of people tinker and change things just to try and be. I don't know. They try stuff. I know. I'm not critical of Beirne. I was looking at the Super Rugby. They left Slipper out so you could have the celebratory game at Bruce Stadium when they come back. I think you just got to keep going with the team. If you've got a good team, you stick with it. That's my opinion. You got to freshen people up. I get it, but all credit to the coach there. He just kept with the same side, and the team played with the confidence that the coach showed in them.
Eddie Jones, your thoughts?
Maybe Stevie wanted a holiday in Fiji.
Maybe, I don't know.
Wasn't very nice weather for it. It rained. It bolted with rain most of the game. Terrible. But anyway, horrid conditions. Yeah. Horrid conditions. Anyway, Eddie, back to Cardiff where it didn't rain.
Yeah, well, I think on this podcast we predicted a Wales victory. They've been improving all Six Nations, and as Ewan said, the consistency now, they're getting their selection. They know their best players. They've been able to keep their best players on the field. They're developing a pretty good combination. They look like they got a good idea of how they want to attack, particularly. The acting coach, Matt Sheeran, is now the attack coach there to Steve Tandy. And they're becoming a more difficult team to beat, and they'll continue to get better. I think Italy were no one wanted to predict it, but it was always going to be emotionally difficult for them to lift themselves again. And to go to, you go to Wales and everyone knows what it's like, but you just saw the start of it, that dark Millennium Stadium. It's 6 o'clock in the afternoon, so they've all been in the pub for 6 hours probably. It's loud, it's raucous. They would have spoken about it all week, Italy, and then the game starts and you're 21-0, looking down 21-0, and you're thinking where the game's gone, And Italy, a good team, in previous years they would have fallen away, but they kept going at it, tried to get back in the game, but Wales just had too much for them on the night.
What about that for Ewen McKenzie, that challenge of, you've had that victory in Rome, that famous victory over England and everything that comes with it, and you've got that final game away. It must have been very difficult for Gonzalo Caseta during the week to keep the players where he needed to get that one final effort. Because to me, as soon as the game started, they just looked just that little bit underneath the performance, and Wales were just above their level. And whenever that happens at this level, you're always going to get a lopsided contest.
Eddie spoke about this a few weeks ago, this emotional contribution to the game, and one flat tire across the team, or you got to. So that's one of the things that the coach has to monitor. And we talked about this. We talked about where Wales are up to emotionally, but also what Italy needed to do, to get to a new level on the mountain, like 3 wins in the tournament, never done before. There was a great challenge there, but they had to do it away from home and put the previous celebrations out of the way. Now, a team like the All Blacks doesn't miss that opportunity, and they never miss it in any given year. Really, they always they rise and find a way. Italy got to learn that, and I think I flagged that. That's the thing they had to learn or demonstrate or be able to show that they've actually reached another level. They've certainly reached another level as a team, but there was a chance there to get up into sort of, stratospheric levels for them and be mixing it, and it's subtle. I heard Michael Hooper talking about on commentary. They were talking about in commentary in the Super Rugby game about, people playing Italy in the Nations Championship, you're going to have to watch out. They're a much improved team. So the recognition of improvement is subtle, but it's there. People have suddenly got one eye, and so you get respect. You earn respect through by consistent performance, not just a performance. And that's what that challenge for Italy was, to be consistent. Not they're already beating good teams. They had to be consistent. That was their challenge, and they came up a bit short.
Okay. Marking time for the 2026 Guinness Six Nations for Wales and for Italy. Ewen McKenzie, out of 10.
I think the Wales journeys are, they're a 7 or 8 for me in terms of the journey. They're obviously not the finished item, and just in terms of their where they're up to, I think that I'd give them a good 7.5. I think for where they got to in the end, probably an 8, and. Italy, I'd give them a 7. I think they've had a really good tournament, but I personally expect a little bit more. They had some good wins, but not enough. I expected a bit more consistency there, so I'd give them a 7.
All right, Eddie Jones.
Wales a 7 with asterisk.
Okay.
I think
what's the asterisk for?
That it's a little bit plus the 7. And I'll give Italy a 9 because we're playing them next.
What did you like about the Italians?
They had their first ever victory against England. That's huge.
Yeah.
In the history of the Six Nations, that is absolutely massive for a small rugby country like Italy to beat a big rugby country like England. That is absolutely massive. So. Yeah, I think and in all seriousness, I think they've had a really good Six Nations. But the challenge is, and you alluded to the All Blacks. Think about how long it took the All Blacks to learn how to win a World Cup after the which was the first one? 87. Yeah, when was the next one? 2011.
For them winning, yeah. They lost 91, 95, yeah. Yeah.
So what's that, 24 years?
99, yeah, that's right, yeah.
24 years to learn how to cope with expectation. So Italy aren't expected. Well, people expect them to learn it in 1 week, but they're not going to learn that. It's going to take time, and whether they ever learn it is a question mark. We've just seen here in Japan. So Japan won the last World Baseball Classic, just got beaten to the quarterfinals, and everything in the paper's been about them playing the final against America. Everything, and it seeps into their thinking. They got the best player in the world in Otani, all these superstars, and they get beaten in the quarterfinal. That's difficult, mate.
All right. But anyway, again, I think both teams should be well pleased with their 2026 performances in the Guinness Six Nations. And again, a lot of gratitude I have. And I must say, at the end of each of these games, I was just sitting there watching and thinking, how good was that? So, again, a big thanks from me to you, Wales and Italy, because I enjoyed that much. And then to the final, the big match of the weekend, England versus France, 48 to 46, an absolute heartbreaker for England. Ewen McKenzie, your assessment of this particular match?
It was a high quality game, and it just went. The lead changed a bunch of times. I think what was it again? 7 tries to 6. So England scoring more tries than France. I wouldn't have expected that, but they did, and they found a way. And I guess we're probably all judging England on how they've been through the tournament. But if you looked at how we were judging England before the tournament, that sort of performance was probably there. Would have easily been there in my mind. I thought they were going to win, so I tipped them to win that game before the tournament started. So, in the end, it's how if you want to be honest, it's how I would have expected them to play, and I would have expected the game to be a higher scoring game, not as high scoring as that, but a high scoring game with both teams going at each other with basically good forwards and good backs. So it went down the wire. There's not a lot. Again, I go look at the stats. There's not much in the stats at all really to talk about. So it got down to the micro moments of when people did or didn't do things, hit high tackles and little things. I did have one question that comes out of the game. It's a question for Eddie. When teams are playing under advantage, and they do something that would normally be a yellow card in normal play, they just seem to ignore that fact that that's a yellow. So I saw it on the weekend in a couple of games. They would do these deliberate knock-ons and things like that in under advantage, and the referee just went back for the original penalty. Is that the standard protocol to go back to the first infringement, or?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the first infringement, mate.
Yeah.
Which I think's a bit strange, isn't it? Why have advantage then?
Exactly. So the advantage is only to score points or score a try or get meters, but the advantage doesn't extend to foul or cynical play. I found that odd. I mean, I don't want to bang on about refereeing. It was just a question really because I saw it in a couple of games, and I thought, well, why wouldn't that be dealt with? Because you're playing under advantage and you're trying to score a try, and if they cynically do something, then why wouldn't you deal with it? And instead they go back to the original offence. For me, that's a bit strange. Anyway,
good point.
Yeah, there's some yellow card impact after half time, but wonderful play that Jessam intercept was brilliant play. I think he's a really good player, and to be able to read that and then obviously score the try, maybe should have scored nearer the post, but nonetheless, it was a great bit of play. So I think the game was littered with moments of brilliance. The French winger, you just can't stop him. So it was just a high quality game. You wouldn't want to be critical about anything. So it just got down to little moments, and that's when you'd say to players, all the little things matter. You don't look back through the game and go, what if? There's no point. It was a high quality game, and in the end, it was determined by a penalty. But really, the game was determined along the way because they were going at each other, and it was try for try, and that's it's as good a game as you're going to get in effectively a final of a tournament.
Eddie Jones.
3 things that stood out for me was one, England's identity as a rugby team. I think they're they're still struggling to find it. I think Steve knows how he wants to play, and he knows the players he wants. But you've got this, we spoke about it last time, this immaturity of English media of always wanting to play this glorious game, side-to-side game. So he's battling that. And I think there's probably an internal battle going on within the players. And I'm not saying there's problems there, but I think, if you look at maybe the last game where Itaje and Finn Smith apparently had a bit of a verbal dust up on the field, that would be an indication that they're not quite sure what they want to be as a team. And I think that's the big challenge for them, because when they get it right, they're a good, very good rugby team. Yeah, and you have to be to win 12 tests in a row. That's the reality. But I thought early on they tried to play like they thought they should play. A lot of out the back, a lot of lateral play. And they haven't got a particularly big team now, but I think they play better when they try to play like a big team, when they play squarer through the line and then try to play off that and create, Genge got him going forward. He was like that young fella again. Off the back fence, running hard, and changed the team. I thought he changed the team more than anyone. Second thing, Dupont, I reckon's still an outstanding player, but he's going through that sort of post-ACL where you're a different player, you don't have that elasticity, and he's still adapting to a major injury. And so he's not the force he was, but I think in the near future he'll regather that. And I think the third thing is that the way we're going to have rugby in the future? Is that what we want? Tries, a lot of tries, big scores, players celebrating. It's all about social media. And if that's the case, that's good. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all, but let's make sure then we adjust the way we interpret the laws. Thinking about, I mentioned to you, I had a chat to Steve Hansen on the weekend about the yellow card. He had that idea about maybe just it's like basketball, you have a free throw. So you get a penalty in front of the post for a sin bin offence. So you keep 15 and 15 on the field and you get a shot at penalty goal. So, great game of rugby.
So let's just stick with that for a moment because, for mine anyway, that particular yellow card against Genge was harsh. Harsh for a penalty try, but harsh then for a yellow. Then he's off for 10 minutes in the beginning of the second half. France come back, pile on a couple of tries. Did the penalty fit the crime, Ewen McKenzie? And what do you think of Steve Hansen's idea there, which I think is probably a pretty good one, of let's keep 15 on 15 and have a penalty kick straight in front?
Well, I think you know my answers. I mean, I've been hanging on about 15 on 15 for 6, 8, 10 months now.
Stick with it. Stick with it. We're going to get there.
I don't want to get into the micro analysis of it, because what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing things that I saw people getting marched for like 6 months ago. They're not even stopping the game for it anymore, which I'm actually happy about that, because they're getting on with it. So there's rugby incidents that happen, inadvertent things that happen in a contact sport. So I'm happy with those sorts of things, but all it does is highlight the situations when they do go to the card, because there's less of them. When they do go, it's got to be for a good reason. So then you get, that's the debate there. So, and because the problem I have is not so much the yellow card, it's the fact that you end up with inequity in players, and you end up with tries being scored, generally speaking, by the opposition. Sometimes the team of short can still score a try, but generally speaking, it puts you at a disadvantage. And I just don't feel the game should be sorted out by the players playing against each other in 15 on 15. So, Steve Hansen's idea. I mean, I've come up with ideas. It's something I think rugby needs to have a good look at, because there's a bunch of ways they can deal with it without trying to slow the game down. They've just got to try and offer a genuine contest, because everyone scrambles. As soon as there's one player off, you're playing, you've got to make decisions depending on which player it is. You've got to make decisions whether you're going to reinforce the scrum or not, play one short. Where's the hole? So then the tactics become slowing the game down while you're waiting for the clock to run down. So you're doing things that are deliberately slow, which is not in the end. So there's a lot of impacts by having the one man less scenario. So if it's just stayed 15 on 15, you can still play the game that you've practiced and how you want to execute and still play your tactics, whereas everything's compromised for 10 minutes for something that is marginal, often marginal.
Eddie Jones, would you agree that the refereeing across the 3 matches at the weekend had a big impact on the quality of the matches that were played? Because there was authority, there was decision making, there was not waiting for the TMO. They weren't going back to second guess everything, because I think even the first Irish try, you could have almost looked at obstruction. Same first Scottish try, there looked a little bit of obstruction, but they seem to just be now. And I noticed that the referees on a number of occasions said, that's what I saw. So they're not saying I'm right or wrong. They're just saying, that's how I saw it. That's how I call it. Let's get on with it. For mine, I think that was one of the great strengths of all of the games over the weekend, was this decisiveness in the refereeing, which allowed the players to get on and sort through most of it.
I think you're right, mate. I think it's matured a bit during the tournament, and I think probably finished off in a pretty good spot. And the other thing, all this nitpicking about the referee, probably particularly from English fans, is the reality is when you play away from home, you got to play better. Like that's why we have home and away games. We didn't want home and away. We'd have everything in a neutral stadium. You wouldn't have the atmosphere. You got to play better when you're away from home. You got to face the facts that a few tough decisions aren't going to go your way. That's the reality of the game. If you don't like it, go and watch curling or whatever you want to watch.
All right. So, we'll come to your scores for both England and France in a moment, but post the match, there seems to be part of the English media mounting a campaign to get rid of Steve Borthwick and to replace him with your old teammate, both Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie, Michael Cheika. There seems to be a concerted move to replace Borthwick with Cheika. Ewen McKenzie, your thoughts on that?
Oh, I haven't seen that, but I think that Steve Borthwick's got the team. He didn't get the outcome in the tournament, but he's just come off a very successful patch. He's got a squad. We've talked about all this stuff prior to the tournament, so a couple of games have gone awry, and he's still trying to develop a few things. But he's got depth, and he knows how he wants to play. So I think it's dangerous, just knee-jerk reaction, just changing because you don't know what you're going to get. You've got a guy that's very entrenched in the English system, understands and knows the playing bases, developed depth, and they've just put on a pretty good performance. They could have easily won that game, and no one would be having this conversation. So you've got to make sure that you're having conversations based on, on the total picture. I understand they didn't deliver in the tournament how we all expected. I tipped them to win the tournament. So, but that's how it goes. I mean, everyone at the moment, the All Blacks aren't playing as well as they want. That's what happens. You get their cycles in it. They've had a good cycle. They've gone off the rails a little bit, but they're back on track. They didn't get the win. If you're going to measure it on wins, but you got to measure it on the individual contributions as well. So, I'm not keen on just changing the coach just because the media talks about it. I think that's a bit lame.
Yeah, Eddie Jones, your thoughts on Cheika to replace Borthwick?
I won't give a verdict on that or a comment on that because I think that's that sort of thing. We know where that comes from. There'll be some board member at the RFU who thinks that's a good idea. He had lunch or dinner with Michael Cheika or someone who knows Michael Cheika. He'd do this and that to the team, which I'm sure he would. And then it becomes he leaks that to a journalist, and that becomes a story.
Yeah.
And that bloke sits with a smile on his face at the board meeting, knowing that he started that. We know how it works. I think Steve's done a good job with England. They've just come off a string of 12 wins. They've had a bad tournament. Like, there's no doubt they've had a bad tournament. So he'll need to show to the RFU that he knows why he's had a bad tournament and he knows how he's going to turn it around. And I'm sure he can do that.
So this review process, you did a number of them with the RFU. What happens take us through the review process? So Steve Borthwick, he's back at home, he's back behind the desk. What happens, and what's the timing of this sort of review? Does it happen inside a week, or is it 2 weeks? How long till Steve Borthwick presents to the RFU, and who in fact does he present to?
When I did it, it was the performance director outside guy, which was Ian McGeechan, a couple of board members, and they go through. But they come in, and none of those guys that you're reporting to have actually been in the team and watched it. So the first thing, if you want to review someone's performance, you got to watch them coach, and you got to get them done. They've got to understand the issues you're dealing with, because we don't, sitting here, we don't know the selection issues that Steve's had. We don't know who's been injured, who's had family problems, what the situation is, whether he was going to be able to pick his best team. So you need to be able to know that, but you've got to present. They usually have a premeditated view, which will be driven by the media of where you should, what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And it's tough, mate. It's a tough process. Yeah. Like I remember the last one I did, I knew it was a waste of time. I was gone. I was brown bread. So, you go in there knowing you're dead. You're just trying to look like you're alive, but you're dead. And but the other thing I'd say on that, I remember Michael Atherton, who's a bright guy, writes really well for the Times in cricket, and obviously follows rugby. I remember him saying to me, he said, about 12 months, because the drums were starting to beat, he said, generally when it gets to this level, you're gone, mate. And he was right. And I think, with Steve, the problem is it's just so loud now, unless he can find someone within the RFU who's got enough sense to support him. Because I think, I'll say it again, I think he's the right man to coach England, and I think they should support him through this. Maybe he's got a few things wrong, and they'll need to help him rectify those errors, but they'd be foolhardy to change coach now. Not anything against Cheika. Cheika do a good job. They had a good win, the Roosters, on the weekend. He would have been happy with his ruck defence. They beat South, so he'd be on top of the world.
The RFU statement of last week, surely that's a bad sign. That, to me, it was an awful sign, undermining of the coach in the week leading into an important tournament. So I don't know. It all adds up to. So you think Eddie Jones, that it may in fact happen that the drums are beating strongly enough? Not that, because I'm a bit with you. I think Steve Borthwick needs all the time in the world to finish the job. But is your assessment that the noise may in fact claim him this close to the 2027 Rugby World Cup?
Oh, look, I don't know, mate.
No.
And I don't really want to get involved in it.
No.
But I do know one of the things, I was listening to someone this morning on the way in here, and they were talking about the fact that most coaches, when you go to the next level, it takes you 4 or 5 years to really learn your trade.
Yeah. And
I think that's pretty true. Like, international coaching is completely different from club coaching. I think what Steve's now 4 years into it, I think they'd be foolhardy to change the coach now leading to the World Cup. They're going to get the best result with Steve as the head coach. And maybe after the head coach, after the next World Cup, it will be time to change, because everyone has a limit, but he's a good coach. He's done a good job, and I think he should take him to the World Cup. And then maybe after the World Cup, it'll be time to change.
Yeah, well, let's wait and see. But anyway, one would hope that common sense prevails, and Steve Borthwick is given the opportunity to finish the job, particularly off such a stunning performance by England at the weekend where they played so very well. Okay, Ewen McKenzie, England out of 10, France out of 10 for the 2026 Rugby World Cup.
I'd give France a 9. I think they were an outstanding team across the tournament. As I said, they played good 56 minute, 50 or 60 minute patches, and then they had this sort of gap. But in terms of they won the tournament, so I'll give them a 9. England, I tipped them to win the tournament. They didn't get there. They came up short. I'd give them a 6 based on some of the bits and pieces I saw along the way. But, they pulled up short. And just adding to what Eddie was talking about, I mean, I think they're still in a little bit of transition. You've got some older players, Jamie George and Ford. He's made a decision on Ford running with Finn Smith. So I think that he got benefit out of those guys in between the World Cup, and he got his run of games. The wins using Ford at 10, but I think he's now moving to a new era, and some of the younger players will come in, so he's probably got a couple more decisions to make in his squad. We also talked about Tadhg with his family situation, and you can see he hasn't been at his best, particularly earlier in the tournament, and probably for good reason.
He was pretty good at the weekend, Tadhg. I thought he had an enormous game.
That's what I'm saying. So if you look at the last game,
that's fair enough. I get what you're saying.
You're only as good as your last game. Well, they played well in their last game. They didn't win the scoreboard, but they could have easily won it. And and that was away from home too. So I think there was quality in what they put out there, and he'd made a few decisions about that. So I just think he's got a couple more decisions to make and bolster his squad a little bit. He's going to get some of his front rowers back. So I think it's not all doom and gloom. It's just disappointing that they didn't fare well. I think the Scotland game was the one that really stuffed them.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
Now, Eddie Jones has had to jump off to his day job, so we don't get the opportunity to get his score for England and France, but I would say he would be a bit with you, Ewen McKenzie, on your assessment of both teams. But again, wonderful way to finish the tournament, and really for it to come down to the last kick after however many weeks it's been, 7 weeks, 8 weeks of the tournament all up, whatever it was. Certainly a stunning competition, Ewen McKenzie, and rugby union at its very, very best at the 2026 Guinness Six Nations.
Yes, it was. It really was, and I've been impressed. I've probably never focused on it as much. Watching it, I've watched the games, but not in the competition context, and more just one out. This is the first time I've watched it sort of with the competition in mind, and I enjoyed it. It was a really good, and everyone on their day, I thought it was an easy. When I did my tipping at the start, I thought there's probably 3 games here that I might get wrong, but in the end I was massively wrong. So just which is what you want. It's only 6 teams, but to be able to not tip in a 2-horse race is good. It's a good thing.
No, very good, and well done to England and France for putting on such a cracking final match of this year's tournament. But anyway, the next opportunity we're going to see these teams play is when the first Nations Championship kicks off in July. And I won't go through all of the matches, but Ewen McKenzie, take this as the first weekend. Japan will play Italy at Prince Chichibunomiya Stadium in Tokyo. New Zealand then play France in Christchurch. Ireland play Australia in Sydney, in Paddington at the Allianz Stadium, the old Sydney football stadium. Fiji take on Wales in Cardiff. South Africa play England at Ellis Park. And the final match of the opening round of the Nations Championship, North versus South, is Argentina versus Scotland in Cordoba. That has a lot. That looks to me like a very enjoyable weekend of rugby for this new championship that World Rugby and the nations have come together to design. It really promises an enormous amount, doesn't it, this Nations Championship?
Well, it does, and I've stumbled across the Nations Championship website, and so if anyone wants to have a look, it's quite well presented, so you can have a look and just see the enormous depth of games that are going to occur, one day at a time, bang, 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 across the world. It's just, so nationschampionship.rugby.com is the website, worth a look. I've got it, I've saved it on my browser so I can keep track of the games because there's so many. But, the way that the form's gone, Japan, Italy, that'll be an interesting game. Argentina, Scotland, forget about the South Africa, England, New Zealand, France. I mean, Australia, Ireland.
Australia, Ireland. In Sydney. So competitive, and then we have the three rounds, and again, it's North versus South. So, they'll be competing for positions on the log before they head to Europe at the end of the year.
Looking through, Australia's got France round 2, and then Italy round 3. Well, that's no gimme either. New Zealand's got to play Italy as well. Then they've got to play Ireland. So there's some tough games in here. So,
and I think it's also going to help with us getting to know even more the players from each of the teams. So we're going to be seeing them more. I do hope that with the Nations Championship that teams, like the French, send their best players, because I would imagine that they'll be very keen to win the Nations Championship given the importance that it will take on. So you would hope that the very best players are available for selection, the players that we saw at the weekend.
Yeah, but the June window was problematic because the top 14 was still going, or the finals of the top 14 was still going. That was why they always sent like a B team south. But this is firmly in July, which is, they have a very short off season, but it's firmly in July. So it'll be outside of the top 14 window. It'll upset their preparation window, but not too much. So I think there's no reason why France wouldn't send their players, other than it's been a long season of footy.
Indeed. Yeah, but I don't know. For mine, I think very quickly this Nations Championship, played as it is sort of every second year, is very quickly going to take on, the World Cup. The Rugby World Cup will always be the pinnacle. But not close, not far behind it, I think, on an annual basis will be this Nations Championship, because it is, the best playing the best to see who is the best. So, anyway, lots to look forward to. And, if you've got interest, go and jump onto that website and just peruse each of the rounds, particularly the rounds 1, 2 and 3, because there's so much great rugby to be played all over the Southern Hemisphere. So that will be something to look forward to. We also finished the under-20s Six Nations. So Italy, 20 points to 13 winners over Wales. Ireland, 47, defeated Scotland 14, and France, 31, defeated England 28. And in Madrid, the big one-day gala finale of the Rugby Europe Championship, the Netherlands, 76, defeated Germany 7. Belgium 39 defeated Switzerland 16. Spain 29 defeated Romania 23. And the champions for Rugby Europe for 2026, Portugal, winners 19 points to 17 over Georgia. And if my memory serves me correctly, I think Georgia have won the last 4 or 5 Rugby Europe Championships. So we also have the World Rugby Nations, the Nations Cup, which is going to be played in the balance of the World Rugby, the Nations Championship is the top 12, and then the next 12 who are participating at the 2027 Rugby World Cup will compete in the Nations Cup. The World Rugby Nations Cup at the same time as the Nations Championship. So Portugal will be competing, as will Georgia, Spain and Romania. So they will all be playing in that tournament, which will take place in July. But Ewen McKenzie, Portugal, 19 points to 17, winners over Georgia. Great to see a win for them.
Yeah, no, they've been thereabouts and been one of the most improving teams in the last 5 or 6 years. So all credit to them. George is a really good scalp. Georges have been a very consistent team as well, and be able to get that win would be very satisfying for them and their fan base. Yeah.
And I look forward to the report on the Rugby Unity Substack of the big day in Madrid. We're going to have coverage of that on the Rugby Unity Substack. So make sure you jump across there and catch all the news of that big day in Madrid. But congratulations to Portugal, 2026 Rugby Europe Championships winners over Georgia. But here is some news, actually, that was released by World Rugby on the 13th of March. And reading from the statement, World Rugby can confirm that a major joint investigation conducted by World Rugby and the World Anti-Doping Agency has resulted in anti-doping rule violations being confirmed against 6 players and 1 member of the support personnel from the Georgian men's senior national 15s team. The investigation was triggered when irregularities in urine samples were identified by World Rugby's Athlete Passport Management Program, covering an extended period of time prior to the Men's Rugby World Cup in 2023 in France. World Rugby alerted WADA immediately, and the two bodies worked closely together throughout a complex and extensive parallel investigations which featured targeted player testing and DNA analysis by World Rugby, including on historical samples held via World Rugby's long-term storage program. 6 players and a member of team support personnel have been charged and sanctioned in relation to an orchestrated scheme involving recreational drugs and sample substitution, a practice prohibited by the WADA Code and the World Rugby anti-doping rules. So, Ewen McKenzie, what is your views on that news from World Rugby?
It's good that they're being vigilant and looking. It does seem to be a long time in the execution and so I don't even know who was playing back then. So I'm not quite sure what sanctions you can impose and whatever. It might be all too late, but at least they're looking, and it's good that they to have that knowledge that the sport's trying to be as clean as possible. It mentioned recreational drugs and substituting, and I don't know how they're getting. I assume the member of staff was charged with something else because they wouldn't have been doing urine samples on the member of staff. So he must have been the person's providing, or he must have been I don't know. So the mind boggles. So anyway, so I don't know. It'd be nice if they sort of maybe elaborated on what the sanctions might be, just so that, because the penalty is a good deterrent if people know what the penalties are going to be. So hopefully there's something significant there. That is
the latest news. Now, we are hard up against time again, and so I do apologise. 2 programs in a row. The third voice, we will not be able to get to you today, but the questions are still there, and most of them are still relevant, and we do have to get Ewen McKenzie back to his day job. But Ewen McKenzie, thank you once again for joining us on Rugby Unity, a podcast with a very simple ambition. And it's that: how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world? And Ewen McKenzie, certainly playing rugby like we saw on Saturday will help secure the future prosperity of rugby around the world, because it would be hard to find sport, 3 matches of high-quality sport as entertaining as we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, and the imperative that we talked about to be able to measure how many people were watching those games. I'd love to know how many people worldwide were watching that final game, knowing how relevant it was to Ireland's prospects.
Oh, can you imagine how many people were watching in Ireland?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I think that,
and the Irish diaspora as well. You know, you consider where they're everywhere. That's right. Irish people are everywhere.
And being able to quantify the metrics around these things is a really important next step, I think, for World Rugby. So then we can really tap into it.
And I did mention the other day I have spoken with Alan Gilpin and have a long interview with Alan coming up. It's going to publish on the March the 27th. And I did raise that issue with him. And he did point out, he said, well, it's part of the challenge of rugby is the fragmentation, and that, every union largely owns different rights and therefore sells them in different ways. And so therefore it's very hard to aggregate. But I would have thought that maybe the Six Nations might be able to aggregate, given that they sell their rights as a bundle, and that we might be able to understand just how many people have watched it through to 2026.
I see the aggregation impediments, but I don't see the sharing of data. Like within those individual unions, they're obviously selling products to TV rights and things like that, and doing deals. So they should be able to pass that on, the top line data, so that we can at least know what our audiences are. I think that's a good thing to spruik, to know what the worldwide audience is. I mean, other sports can do it. We should be able to do that.
Well, the fact that they can do it, listen, we won't get into that. It's too late. We'll start that at another time, another conversation. So anyway, Ewan, thank you so much. And to you, the audience, thank you. And again, thank you for your ongoing participation in our platform. And so the platform is not just YouTube. It is Apple, Spotify, all of the various podcast apps and social media, where there is often lots of engagement and activity. So please, a like, a comment, a share, indeed a review on your favourite podcasting app. That is great. We're grateful for those because it does help us to be found. And you can also log into Substack to capture everything. And next week we will be launching the Big Three for the first time. And Ewen McKenzie, I'm going to send you through the latest test of the Big Three. I'd received it not long before coming to air, and it looks absolutely right. So when we come on air next week, we will have that ready for the third voice and for our other listeners around the world to enjoy, because it is a high-quality product, and looking forward to getting that circulated. So, people, thank you so much for coming back. What a fantastic weekend of rugby. What a great tournament. And as I said before, a big thanks to all the teams and the coaches and the players and everyone who's involved in it. It's just created so much joy, so much happiness, not only for me, but for millions of people around the world to watch our game played as well as it was during the Guinness Six Nations. So a big thanks from me on behalf of the Rugby Uni audience to you for the hard work, because Ewen McKenzie, there is so much work that goes into it, isn't it? When you think about how hard those teams have worked and the thought and the planning and everything that goes into it, it's just an enormous sacrifice, isn't it?
It is. There's a lot of time spent in camps and travelling and things that you never even see. The logistics of it is massive, and the time away from family, all those sorts of things, it's all relevant. It's a very intense period, and the thing about rugby is there's always another one coming. So it's a big commitment by the players and the staff and the unions. So that's good that there's people watching and excited by it all.
All right, people. Well, listen, we'll be back at the same time next week. We are going to, for this next period, drop back from 2 programs a week. Out of competition, we'll go to our normal 1 program a week. We'll have to work out just exactly when that's going to be, but it'll be about the same time most weeks. And we do have a series of special one-off interviews with Alan Gilpin, with Herbert Mensah, with Bill Goran, the CEO of USA Rugby. So plenty of rugby still coming, but we'll give Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones a bit of a rest, allow them to gather themselves and get back to their day jobs and work. But anyway, a big thanks, as always, to Ewen and to Eddie. A big thanks to you. So, people, we'll be back at the same time in about a week's time. But for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.